Patisangvedi is used for, a direct sort of maybe hardcore experience, bodily experience. And so what seems to me to be the case is that as one is breathing in and out, it doesn't mean that one shifts the attention away from the breath to the body as a whole, but one is still being aware, keeping the focus point on the in and out breath, wherever one can observe it most clearly, but the awareness of the whole body becomes more distinct, so that one is able to focus on the breath area, but at the same time, one gets the sense of the body as a totality in the act of breathing. There's a technical word for this in maybe neurology or physiology, proprioceptive. Has anybody come across that word before? Let's see if I could spell it correctly. I think that's correct. So that is the sense that we have of our body as an entity, existing in space. So we have this to some degree all of the time. Even though I'm standing here right now speaking, so I'm not just aware of speaking, but I have this kind of background experience or awareness of my body as a physical entity standing here. And so as one is attending to the in and out breath, then the way I see it is that the sense of the body in its totality sort of emerges and becomes more clearer and more distinct. Okay, then we come to the fourth phase of the first tetrad. This is, I shall breathe in, tranquilizing the bodily formation. He trains thus, I shall breathe out, tranquilizing the bodily formation. Now what's called the bodily formation here is kaya sankhara. The expression kaya sankhara is used in several senses in the suttas. Usually it's used to mean activities performed with the body, that is, volitional activities done with the body that create karma. But here it's used in a special sense to mean the in and out breathing. We find this definition of the bodily formation in Sutta number 44. This is on page 399. It's said here that in and out breathing are the bodily formation, then the question is raised, why are in-breathing and out-breathing the bodily formation? Then the reason is given that in-breathing and out-breathing are bodily. They are states or dhammas bound up with the body. That's why in-breathing and out-breathing are the bodily formation. So that would be the meaning of bodily formation, which is relevant here. It's the in-breathing and out-breathing. And so one trains thus, I shall breathe in, tranquilizing the bodily formation. One trains thus, I shall breathe out, tranquilizing the bodily formation. And it's said by most teachers that one doesn't make a deliberate effort to tranquilize the breath, but just as one goes on, being mindful of the breath, focusing upon the in and out breath, it's just part of the natural process that increased awareness of the breath, or as one is increasingly aware of the breath, the mind becomes more subtle, more refined. And as the mind becomes more subtle and more refined, then the breathing becomes more subtle, more refined, or more tranquil. And something further to be noticed about the last two stages in this first tetrad and all of the other stages that come after this. In the first two stages, the Buddha speaks about the monk. He understands this, he understands that. But from the third stage on, he says, he trains thus. So in this case, it's not just something that one is aware of, but one has to make a deliberate effort to train oneself in these further stages. But most teachers that I've learned from or read or heard say, don't make a deliberate effort to breathe more slowly or more calmly, but just be aware of the breath. And as one is aware of the breath, that is the training. As one is aware of the breath, then the breath on its own will become subtler, more tranquil. Okay, maybe at this point I'll pause and ask whether there's any questions on anything we've covered so far. Not yet going into the later sections. Yes? Please take the other microphone.
So is the training to be aware? That's the training.
The training is really to be mindful of the breath. Okay, Victor, and then we'll go up to...
Hello. Yes, when you were discussing focusing between the nostril and the upper lip, is the point to keep the mind there, not follow the breath going all the way in?
Yeah, not to follow the breath going in.
You kind of want to keep it there, in that area.
One keeps the breath in that area.
And if you choose another area, same thing, you want to keep, like if you choose to focus on the, I don't know, your chest or your belly button.
Whatever area one chooses, then one keeps the attention
in that
on
vicinity.
that area.
Okay, thanks.
And it's not between the nostrils and the upper lip, but it's any place within this area where one feels the breath most distinctly. So it can be, for some people, they'll get the sense of the breath just inside the nostrils. Some people will get it a little bit just on the outer rims of the nostrils. Some people will get it over the area just below the nostrils. It will differ from one person to another. Well, one starts off not narrowing the area too much. Because if one narrows it too much, then it will become too subtle and then the mind will drift away.
You mentioned, or you talked about why he started with the long breath as opposed to the short breath,
Yeah.
and I assume you have speculated about that, and I'd be grateful to hear if you can share some of that speculation.
I didn't quite get it.
You raised the question of why long came before short.
Yeah.
I assume you thought about that a certain amount, and I wonder if you had come up with any thoughts.
I haven't. I said it's been a puzzle for me. I don't know if anybody else has any ideas about this.
But the only one I thought of, and I rejected,
Yeah.
but it came up, is that in his most recent experience, the long breath is what was present for him because he's so deeply engaged in it. But he's teaching other people, and I'm sure he would also have considered that. So I share your puzzlement.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a layman's understanding and really getting when you are running on some extra activity, your body needs more oxygen, and your breath would be faster, I would believe. While if you are relaxed and you are not doing much,
Oh, I see.
I mean, these are layman's understanding of the breath. There are times I could barely breathe earlier, you know. So, and of course, that's why you can't walk or you can't run because
Right, but if you're running,
automatically it becomes faster, I would think, because body needs more oxygen. You know? I mean, these just not the Dhamma, these just the layman's.
I have a question.
but that would,
But you can also modify it on your own if you want.
yeah, but that would mean that the short breath should come first. Okay, one is running, then one stops running. Okay, when one stops, the breath is coming more quickly, so it's shorter. Then as one settles down, the breath is more relaxed, so then it comes longer. So,
But it needs activity. When there's activity and it needs oxygen, it has to come faster. But at the time of meditation, then you are relaxed completely. And you can vary depending on whether you want a long breath or short breath. Because then the bodily demand is not there.
yeah, but your example seems to imply that the short breath should still come before the long breath. Because when one stops running, one is breathing quickly and shortly. Or maybe the sense is that when the mind is more excited or the body is more agitated, say from running, then one is taking longer breaths because one needs more air. Then as the mind becomes calmer, then we say that the breath is shorter because one doesn't have to bring in so much air. Perhaps. Anyway, it's just conjecture. Any other questions?
I have a question. Yeah, I have my own opinion. I have my own experience, and I have no problem going into the short breath. I start with the long. I mean, from my own experience, I start with the long, and I could go into my short breath, and I could experience that. My question is, when I go into the body, I don't know, because I seem to go into my short breath and stay there for a while, but sometimes I get lost there, so I don't know where I'm at, if I should experience the whole body, or I'm already doing so. I don't know. See, I've seen this before, and I try to experience it in my meditation, but I cannot differentiate either one because I seem to be in the short breath, and I get lost there, and I stay there, but I don't know where I'm at in the bodily. You see, formation, I don't see this one here, how to put it together. And if I'm experiencing that, you know what I mean? Or you don't get it?
I don't quite get it.
Okay. I go into, when I'm meditating, I'm in the long breath, right? I go into my short breath, because it always happens, you know, when you sit down, the brain asks for more oxygen. When you're actually excited and thinking, you ask more oxygen. The brain asks for 25% of the oxygen. As you relax more, your mind is going to reduce the oxygen intake. So biologically, that's what happens. So you consume less oxygen. That's the reason why you're going to go to short breath, biologically, right? But my question is that as I go into my short breath, I stay there, and that's where I stay. I mean, through my whole meditation, but I cannot see myself to go into the bodily formation. Where is it at? Because I cannot find, I tried this a few times, and I see where I find this at, in which point, in your experience, I mean.
tranquilizing the bodily formation.
Tranquilizing it, right, correct.
It just seems to be the natural process, just as one goes on observing the breath, that the breath will become more tranquil, more relaxed, and it also becomes more drawn out.
So I may be in it already, but I don't realize I am. In other
Yeah,
words.
yeah,
Right,
yeah.
got it, understand. Correct, thanks.
Yes, Bhante, I have a question on paragraph 18, and you were talking about the experiencing the whole body, brackets of breath, and
Yeah.
I think all other translations also make that point of breath. But I see your point now, where if we leave that out, it's really we're in a transitional stage
Yeah.
where the breath becomes the bridge between mind and body, because he then talks about the tranquilizing the body. So we're actually moving.
Well, it actually says tranquilizing the bodily formation, and then the bodily formation is identified with the in and out breathing. So it is tranquilizing the in and out breathing, but it could be that the awareness of the whole body becomes, as you put it, the transitional phase into tranquilizing the breath, because the breath seems to have an impact throughout the whole body. And so as one becomes aware of the whole body, then one will realize the need to, just to go on breathing more and more, in a more and more subtle way. And then as one breathes in a more subtle way, then the in and out breath are becoming tranquilized.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Venerable. I wanted to thank you for a clarification on the piece breath and body.
Yeah.
I believe that Venerable Tansara Bhikkhu and Thich Nhat Hanh have your interpretation of breath and body as well. And then, of course, the question that kind of comes up from that, because you have I always find the Ānāpānasati interesting for this kind of battle that comes out over this particular verse. And so I kind of...
The battle between people.
Yeah, the battle between the interpretation, no, it's
Yeah.
the breath body, no,
Yeah.
it's breath in the
Yeah.
body. And so I kind of have a practical question. Does it really matter, aside from trying to be precise with the body?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because there's 16 stages in this process,
yeah.
Could both work, I guess, is kind of...
I would say both could work. It's a practical training, and I say people differ, and one interpretation will work better with some people, the other interpretation will work better with other people.
Thank you.
And it seems also that as one is already in the first phase, before one gets into the 16 stages, with the first statement, mindful he breathes in, mindful he breathes out, it seems that to strengthen the mindfulness in that phase, one will be mindful, one has to be mindful of the beginning, middle, end, and then with the out-breath of the beginning, middle, end of the out-breath. So it seems to me that phase of being aware of the 3 stages is already taking place in that stage of being ever mindful one breathes in, ever mindful one breathes out.
Thank you.
But I know, just to continue a little bit on this, different teachers have different methods. So like Venerable Thanissaro's, like his lineage comes from a monk who was a student of Achan Mun. He was Achan Lee Damodaro. So his method of mindfulness of breathing actually involves observing the breath at different points within the body, which is very, very different from the mainstream, the Theravada tradition, which always says to observe the breath at one point. Okay, but now if one is and I'm sure probably Ajahn Lee Dhammadaro would have been quite an accomplished meditator. But then if one goes with Pa Auk Soyador, the Burmese meditation master, he'll say, keep the mind around the nostrils or the upper lip, because he's very beholden to the commentaries. And so he'll say, this is what the commentary says, that's the authority. Again, take the microphone.
About as tranquilizing the breath, as the breath becomes more subtle, I know from personal experience it becomes harder and harder to keep your mind, it becomes harder to feel the breath because it just becomes very, very subtle.
Yeah.
So is that, so what does one do at that situation? Does that lead to the second tetrad? Is that like one?
No, I say one is still in the first tetrad there, but this is what, I think it's the Visuddhimagga suggests this, and I've also found this to be very useful when that happens. Mm-hmm. Sometimes like the breath becomes so subtle that one can't even experience it.
Right.
But what one does is just put the mindfulness on that area that one has been focusing on. Not trying to observe the breath itself, but just keep the awareness in that area. Right. Just like you are a guard at the entrance to maybe to a movie theater, who has to make sure that everybody coming in has their ticket, or a cat at a mouse hole waiting for the mouse to come out. So one just becomes very observant at that post, just with the awareness there. And as one just observes that, one will catch the breath coming back.
Got it.
But also what's sometimes been suggested, I think it was Goenka who suggests this, if the breath becomes too faint to follow, then one could take a few deliberate long breaths or strong breaths, breathe in and out, deliberately, strongly a few times so that the sensation of the breath comes back. Then one will pick up the sensation again, and then one goes on observing it as it becomes more subtle. So one could try either of those two approaches.
That's something I was doing, I thought I was doing it wrong. That's that technique I was using, but I thought I was doing something wrong.
No, it's not wrong.
It's okay.
Okay, somebody says, the Buddha began his explanation of Ānāpānasati without explicitly mentioning mindfulness, alertness, or sampajanya, and ardency. Are these three factors implied in the instructions? Yeah, they have to be involved in following the instructions, even though they're not explicitly mentioned. Because, he does mention mindfulness. He says, ever mindful one breathes in, mindful one breathes out. And sampajanya has to be there. I translate this as clear comprehension, because one has to be comprehending when breathing in, when breathing out. And what's meant by ardency is energy. And so there has to be mindfulness, and then clear comprehension and energy. And in fact, if one looks at the Satipatthana Sutta, Sutta number 10, where the Buddha introduces mindfulness of breathing under the heading of mindfulness of the body, then he says that, he begins by saying that there are these four foundations of mindfulness. What are the four? Then here a monk abides, contemplating the body as a body, ardent, that's atapi, fully aware, this is sampajano, or with clear comprehension, and mindful. Okay, so that is sort of the heading or the general instructions for all the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And then, just below, then we come to mindfulness of breathing. So these factors are involved in all of the exercises that come under mindfulness or contemplation of the body. And so they'll certainly apply to mindfulness of breathing. So even though the Buddha doesn't mention them in the Ānāpānasati Sutta, but in fact, I think he does mention them, in fact, in the Ānāpānasati Sutta later when he's relating the 16 stages of mindfulness of breathing to the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Then he'll bring in, he says that on that occasion, the monk abides, this is on page 945, when he's engaged in each of the first 4 stages. On that occasion, the monk abides contemplating the body as a body, ardent, fully aware, or with clear comprehension, and mindful. So they are definitely present. Ravi, take the microphone.
In the Hindu meditation, Bhante, they have this, what they call pranayam, the deep breaths and shallow breaths. So apparently it may have been there even at the time of the Buddha. But in Buddhism, isn't it that we just focus mindfully on the natural breath?
Yeah. The mindfulness of breathing is not, that exercise is actually not really part of the Hindu yoga meditation,
no, I know,
but it's part of the yoga practice, which is, regulating the breath through certain exercises.
Right.
But the Buddhist practice of mindfulness of breathing is not the same as pranayama.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, pranayama means prana is breath, and yama is, I think, regulating, controlling.
Right.
But this is just observing the breath at its own natural rhythm.
Right. Thank you, Bhante.
Any other questions? I was intending to do all 16 stages today, and now it's 11:20. Okay, I think since it's 11:20, I think we have to stop for the day, and so we'll continue with the rest of the stages. We'll have the class next week. So that is, today is the 19th, this will be the 26th, July 26th. And I should mention, I'm supposed to give a library lecture tomorrow. Is it 2 p.m.? 2 o'clock? It's on somewhat controversial topic. I call it riding 2 vehicles to nirvana. So if you have time and you're interested, then please feel welcome to come. And then for those who are interested in the study of Abhidharma, we'll be having the second phase of the Abhidharma course over the Labor Day weekend and extending a couple of days beyond. That's August 29th until September 3rd. So in that program we'll be covering, last year we covered first 2 chapters of the Manual of Abhidhamma. Now we'll be covering, rather ambitiously, chapters 3, which are concerned with functions, objects of consciousness, chapter 4 on the processes of consciousness, chapter 5 on themes like karma, rebirth, Buddhist cosmology, and chapter 6 on the Buddhist philosophy of material phenomena. So if you didn't go crazy after last year's course. You mean live streaming? That I think we have to ask, because I'm not in charge of that. Jason or Kairi. We could try to put it on live stream. But they'll be recorded and they will go on Ustream. YouTube.
Will be Ustream, you said?
I said that they'll be recorded and then they'll come up on YouTube. Okay, so we end with the sharing of the merits. Now I think you have the page. So we share the merits with the deities, the devatas, the fierce spirits, the bhutas, the nagas or dragon spirits, and with all beings, asking them to protect the Dharma, to protect the world, to protect ourselves and others. Akasata chabhumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu sasanang. Akasata chabhumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu desanang. Akasata chabhumata Deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu mang parang. Etavatacham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe deva dantu sabba sampati siddhya. Etavatacham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe bhutanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. Etavatacham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe satanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. Bhavagupadaya avici hetato etantare satakayupapanna arupi arupi cha sanya sanyino dukkha pamuchantu pusantu nibhuting. Okay, so we'll come back here. Let's be a little relaxed about it. You could come back at 12:30, then we can have discussion period from 12:30 to 1.